Wasn't it fun to see the slides just now? It was really fun to see all the different activities here. Just grateful. I have a few heartfelt thank yous. First, to our trustees for their selfless service to Ardenwood. Thank you. The members of our senior leadership team, I'm privileged to work with each of them. Robert and his food service crew. How many had lunch here today? Did you? Hope you all enjoyed it who came. You have to reserve. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. It's good. Finally, we're grateful to all the staff at Ardenwood. We really are a family, and we have a wonderful team here. I'd also like to, in addition, thank and recognize Laura Frank Ramirez for her graphic design work for our mailings and newsletters, the things that you see. Laura Frank Ramirez designs those. She's here with us in back. Grateful for that, for her. And to Sarah Banning for her video magic. Sarah used to work for us. You'll be seeing one of her creations a little bit later in the meeting today. Just fun. And thanks to Lynn Kraling for the wonderful, the organ music. I guess he's left. So thank you, Lynn. Really appreciate it. And to James Martin, who will be playing hymns during our meeting coming up here. So let's begin today's meeting with readings by Trustee Vicki Giramonte.
Good afternoon to everybody. Glad you're here. And I'll begin with the Bible. 1 Corinthians, not close enough? Oh, there, okay. How's that? How's that? Are you all hear me? Okay. 1 Corinthians, grace be unto you and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank my God always on your behalf for the grace of God which is given you by Jesus Christ, that in everything ye are enriched by him, in all utterance and in all knowledge, that ye be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment. In 2 Corinthians, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. Now then, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God did beseech you by us. We pray you in Christ's stead, be ye reconciled to God. And such trust have we through Christ to Godward. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of God, who also hath made us able ministers of the New Testament, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. Galatians, for ye are all the children of God by faith in Christ Jesus. And from Science and Health, with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. Millions of unprejudiced minds, simple seekers for truth, weary wanderers athirst in the desert, are waiting and watching for rest and drink. The letter of science plentifully reaches humanity today, but its spirit comes only in small degrees. The vital part, the heart and soul of Christian Science, is love. With one Father, even God, the whole family of man would be brethren, and with one mind, and that God or good, the brotherhood of man would consist of love and truth, and have unity of principle and spiritual power, which constitute divine science. And from miscellaneous writings, these were her letters in miscellaneous writings. This is to the First Church of Christ Scientist in Lawrence. Let your light reflect light. Have no ambition, affection, or nor aim apart from holiness. Forget not for a moment that God is all in all. Therefore, that in reality, there is but one cause and effect. The pride of circumstance or power is the prince of this world that has nothing in Christ. All power and happiness are spiritual and proceed from goodness. Sacrifice to self to bless one another, even as God has blessed you. Forget self in laboring for mankind. Then you will woo the weary wanderer to your door, win the pilgrim and stranger to your church, and find access to the heart of humanity. While pressing meekly on, be faithful, be valiant in the Christian's warfare, and peace will crown your joy. Lovingly yours, Mary Baker Eddy. And her article on love. Love, what a word. I am in awe before it. Over what worlds on worlds it hath range, and is sovereign, the underived, the incomparable, the infinite all of good, the alone God is love. I make strong demands on love, call for active witnesses to prove it, and noble sacrifices and grand achievements as its results. As a human quality, the glorious significance of affection is more than words. It is the tender, unselfish deed done in secret, the silent, ceaseless prayer, the self-forgetful heart that overflows, the veiled form stealing on an errand of mercy out of a side door, the little feet tripping along the sidewalk, the gentle hand opening the door that turns towards want and woe, sickness and sorrow, and thus lighting the dark places of earth. And from retrospection and introspection, the spiritually minded meet on the stairs which lead up to spiritual love. This affection, so far from being personal worship, fulfills the law of love which Paul enjoined upon the Galatians. This is the mind which was also in Christ Jesus and knows no material limitations. It is the unity of good and bond of perfectness. This just affection serves to constitute the mind healer, a wonder worker, as of old on the Pentecost day, when the disciples were of one accord. And from The People's Idea of God by Mrs. Eddy. O Christian Scientist, thou of the Church of the Newborn, awake to a higher and holier love for God and man. Put on the whole armor of truth. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Oh, that you may go to the bed of anguish and look upon this dream of life in matter, girt with a higher sense of omnipotence, and behold once again the power of divine life and love to heal and reinstate man in God's own image and likeness, having one Lord, one faith, one baptism. And back to my Bible. 2 Corinthians. Finally, brethren, farewell. Be perfect, be of good comfort, be of one mind, live in peace, and the God of love and peace shall be with you. The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Ghost be with you all. Amen. Thank you. Am I announcing the hymn? Okay. I'm announcing the hymn, 593, in the new hymnal. The title is We Gather Together. I guess I'll read the first stanza. Should I read the first stanza? Oh, nobody's telling me, so I'll read it. We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing, to sing of God's goodness as year turns to year. We gather professing your grace and your blessing, with thanks for the gospel that gathers us here. Your spirit consoles us, we're safe in your keeping. When roads are uncharted, your love shows the way. Where new hope is springing, you fill us with singing. Your presence delights us with each dawning day. What then can we give you in praise for our journey, when all the earth's treasures were yours from the start? We offer our labor, our love for our neighbors, our gifts and the worship of each hand and heart. So we'll sing that.
I was thinking I was not getting my voice projected out there. So I'll start again. Hello, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here. And I'm Florence Pennegas. I'm a trustee member. I've been serving 6 years on the Ardenwood Board of Trustees, and I'm from Huntington Beach, California. And I see a number of faces I recognize, which is always wonderful. So one of the things I'd like to do is introduce my fellow trustee members. So I'm going to start with Barbara Tone, who is also from Southern California. Barbara, would you stand up and wave to everybody? Great. Barbara is a Christian Science practitioner from Corona del Mar. She's currently acting as Secretary of the Board of Trustees and has been a member of the board for some time now. So you've already met Vicki, but I don't know if you know, Vicki is also a Christian Science practitioner. She's from Walnut Creek, and she's currently acting as Vice President for the Ardenwood Board. And behind her is Nancy Gunnison. Thank you for standing up and waving so everyone knows you. She's also a Christian Science practitioner from Walnut Creek. So I'm really delightful to be on the board and to serve with such wonderful people. So our board president, unfortunately, Pat Barrett, was unable to attend today, and he sends his regrets. So I want to talk a little bit about our role as trustee. One of the most important things we do as trustee members is to provide guidance and support for John Mitchell in his leadership role for Ardenwood. And this is critical in order for him to achieve the healing mission of Ardenwood, which involves focus currently on 4 very important goals. The first of those goals is fullness. We are committed to the full use of our services. And that means not just Christian Science nursing, which I know a number of you may are very familiar with, but also the other programs that we offer, like sheltered care and our residential community program, all of which focus on achieving full and complete healing. Our second goal is improving the quality of services that we offer to our community. This is focusing on the details that make your experience here the best it can be. Third, we're focused on attracting and retaining qualified employees. The outstanding service that we're able to offer is a direct result of the people that are on the staff. One of the reasons we historically have been able to attract really qualified people to Ardenwood is we've been able to offer affordable and attractive housing. And we're committed and eager to improve the housing options that we're able to provide. And fourth, is our reason for being. Our reason for being as an organization is to further the healing mission of Christian Science. We support healing, we expect healing, and we witness it in all of our activities and all the departments of Ardenwood. These are the goals that your prayers, your donations, and your engagement in our activities make it possible for us to achieve. And we very much thank you for all that you do for Ardenwood. And as board treasurer, I'm very happy to report that Ardenwood's finances are in good order. We continue to be debt-free. We are deeply grateful for the strong financial and other support that we receive from you and from the rest of the community that we serve. We are also very grateful for your participation in our fundraising activities and are equally grateful to those of you who have included Ardenwood in your estate plans. An example of how your financial support helps Ardenwood may be useful. A dear Ardenwood former resident included a bequest to Ardenwood as part of her estate planning documents many years ago. Recently, these funds were made available to Ardenwood. These funds are enabling us to announce a new matching challenge in support of our Christian Science nursing training program. Her estate will match up to $200,000 on a dollar-for-dollar basis. The challenge starts today and continues through the end of July. We warmly welcome your participation. And for those of you who are in the process of creating estate documents or needing to refresh your estate documents, we have a mini newsletter entitled Soaring Wing, which is a helpful resource. It is a guide to inspired and responsible estate planning that benefits your loved ones as well as 501c3 charitable organizations like Ardenwood that you support. We're happy to send you a copy, and you can find it on our website at ardenwood.org. We continue to view your financial and other support for Ardenwood as absolutely critical to our ability to meet these important goals. And so on behalf of myself, the other trustees, John, and the whole entire Ardenwood staff, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for all you have done for Ardenwood. Some of which I know, but all of which I feel when I come here. It's such a loving, healing place. And in particular, it's those demonstrations of love that are so much a part of this environment that helps to further our healing mission. So thank you so very much. Now, let's hear what's going on in our residential program.
Good afternoon. I'm Diane Spear, and I'm the director of the residential programs here at Ardenwood. The residences at Ardenwood offer a wonderful opportunity for the Christian Science community to experience a truly full sense of life. And I'm privileged to be here today with two of our residents, Nancy, who joined us just this year as a resident, and Marianne, who came in 2017. We're here to start a conversation with you all and others that love Ardenwood's healing mission. We ask you to please do not hesitate to ask us questions later today at the afternoon reception or anytime they come to you. We love sharing our experience here at Ardenwood. So, first of all, Nancy and Marianne, you know each individual brings unique qualities with them when they move here, yet we all share a love of Christian Science and a desire to grow our understanding. How has Ardenwood contributed to this quest for you? Would you like to go first?
I guess I'm on.
Okay.
Well, first I'd like to say, when I think of Ardenwood, I don't think of a place. I think of a state of mind, a state of consciousness. And then I think of, that reminds me of a hymn, I think it's 218, that says, "O life that maketh all things new." And then later on down in the hymn it says, "The freer step, the fuller breath, the wide horizon's grander view, the sense of life that knows no death, the life that maketh all things new." So I think of this place, at least this is what it's done for me. It's not a beginning, it's not an end, it's more of a becoming anew every day, like Mary Baker Eddy says, we unfold. So it has given me a wider horizon for spiritual growth.
Thank you. And Nancy?
I'm fairly new here at Ardenwood, and I am finding a lot of wonderful experiences. I am enjoying my interaction with all the individuals that I've met, especially at mealtime. There are individuals that have wonderful stories to tell about their life experience. We are all unique. Each one is a charming individual as we sit around the table visiting, as we go on our various field trips. And I am just finding a companionship of like-minded individuals that just gives me a sense of peace and love.
Very good, very good. Some misconceptions sometimes arise about Ardenwood from time to time, and one that I hear every once in a while is, how can one maintain an independent lifestyle here? So I ask you, how has Ardenwood changed your lifestyle?
Well, I don't know that it has changed my lifestyle. I enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy wildlife. I enjoy quiet time. I have plenty of opportunity to experience all of those activities in the garden. Looking out my window from my room, I can see the birds that I love to identify and listen to first thing in the morning. I hear those robins singing, and there's always plenty of time for quiet prayer. I love it here.
Very good. And Marianne?
Well, I feel the same way with Nancy. I feel that it has improved my lifestyle. I lived alone many, many years, and like a lot of people who lived alone maybe don't realize that you are alone, and then you get in an atmosphere where you are not, and you realize the richness that is involved in it. I also like to walk like Nancy. I walk maybe 3-4 miles a day around the grounds here. We have 12 acres of grounds. And you can do whatever you want here. I have a funny story. One of my neighbors from Alameda, where I used to live, came over for lunch, and we were talking, and he leaned over to me and he said, "Marianne, do you all have to go to bed at the same time?" So that shows you some of the misconceptions. I straightened them out. I mean, there's some people I'm sure here that don't even go to bed. Some go to bed late, some go to bed early. Some people eat at every meal in the dining room. Some eat just a couple of meals in the dining room, and then they have something in their room. We have one lady that shows up for dinner. That's when we see her. But everybody are accommodated. We have kitchens on each floor with the laundry room, so that you can, and microwaves in them, so you can do whatever you want. You can live any way that you want. And of course, they do everything for us. I mean, I joke and say that I do 2 things here. I do 1 load of personal laundry, and I make my bed every day until Thursday when they clean my room. And that, as you can see, gives me lots of time to do spiritual work.
Thank you very much, both of you. Now, you've each established a beautiful, lovely home of your own here. And what was your thought process as you did that, as you moved from perhaps a larger home to Ardenwood?
I gave everything away. I let my church friends know that my household furnishings and everything that I had was available for them to use, and it was an absolute joy and sometimes quite surprising to see some of the things that went to individuals that I would have thought would have no interest in those particular things at all. My railroad things went to an individual who had a child friend, a little boy who loves trains. I was joyous, absolutely joyous, when our church musician took my piano, because I taught his daughter in Sunday school. And I said, the first time this little girl gives a recital, please call me. So there was no difficulty at all in downsizing. That word downsizing, it should be called free sizing.
Very good, very good.
Like they say in Korea, free size, fits everyone. I did the same thing Nancy did. I sent out an email blast to my congregation and said, I'm having an open house, come take it all away, whatever you'd like. And my story is that a young couple came who were setting up a household, and you know how expensive that can be. So they took my kitchen and all kinds of stuff, even my window air conditioner, because they were moving to a hot climate. My apartment is what I call user-friendly. I have in it only the things that I use in this lifestyle that I have right now, and I love it. I have not missed one thing that I gave away. I just prayed when I gave things away, God, just give them to somebody that needs them. That's all, you know, and that's what happened, and it delighted me. The only things I have in my apartment are things that I can work with and things that I love, like paintings that my great-grandfather did and gifts my children have given me that I can put around and that kind of thing. But everything else is just geared to what I do here, and I love it. And again, anybody can have as much or as little as they want. If you got a lot of it, though, you got to walk around it and you got to take care of it.
Okay, very good. Well, as you all know, Christian Scientists are always very mindful of praying for the world. Can we do that here effectively when we live in a Christian Science environment?
That's what we do. I just told you we have all this time on our hands, and that's what we do, is pray for the world. But in addition to that, though, many of our members are involved in outreach. We have members here who visit prisons. We have some who are corresponding chaplains. We have some that work in reading rooms. We have some that work in, they're on the lecture committee and they're on the usher committee and so on for different churches here. We have I think 3 different churches that people belong to. So there's as much or as little to do for the world as you want as far as activities and prayer. So it's very, very conducive to that.
Anyone can pray wherever you are for the world. We do have a group of individuals here who participate in current events discussions on a weekly basis. They bring articles and they discuss those articles in service for the community and the world. There is absolutely no limitation here in your service to this community and to the world at large.
Very good. Well, just in wrap up, you know, people often say, am I ready to come to Ardenwood? What would you say is the quality that they need to be ready to come to Ardenwood?
Well, I think it's different for everybody. In my case, it was very natural. A few years ago, I was here on the nursing floor as a patient. Then I was in sheltered care for a few months. And then I went home for a couple of years. And so I knew how it operated. And I remember writing John a letter saying one of the things I was most impressed about was those nurses did not let me get away with one incorrect metaphysical thought. That's just phenomenal, the support that you have, the spiritual growth that you can have, and the comfort from everyone involved. And so I felt really that was important for me, that I kind of knew how it operated. So when the time came when I thought it was appropriate to come here, it was natural. It was a natural progression for me. But I know some other people, it was really big, dramatic things, wonderful stories.
Very good.
I think you're ready to come when you're searching for a sense of complete freedom, when you want to be a blessing because you are blessed. And this is a place of blessing.
Very good. Thank you both so much for being here today. This conversation has just started, though, so please bring your questions to any one of us. Anyone wearing a green ribbon is a resident here, so ask us all. And we now will leave our mics behind and turn the meeting over to our Christian Science Nursing Department.
Hello, I'm Leslie DeFrisco. I'm the Director of Christian Science Nursing Services, and I oversee the skilled Christian Science Nursing floor, which is on our 2nd floor, our active sheltered care program on the 4th floor, and our very active visiting Christian Science Nursing service that visits people in their homes throughout the Greater Bay Area.
Hi, I'm Shannon Nordling, and I'm currently the director of the Christian Science Nurses Training Program here at Ardenwood. And we here, all of us at Ardenwood, are so actively engaged in providing an avenue of support for our church members, our members of the Mother Church, who are really wanting to prepare themselves to represent this by a Christian Science nurse. And recently, I had the opportunity to sit down with a number of our nurses, some of whom are currently in our training program, and others who have since graduated and are now journalisted and serving in many different capacities. And here are some of the highlights they shared about their ministry and how they do the work that they do and why they love it.
So, what led you all into Christian Science nursing?
Well, I wanted to tell you that after 11 years of teaching school, I thought it was time to move on and do something completely different. And I felt really interested in pursuing the Christian Science Nursing Arts program at Arden Wood. Over the years, I'd seen numerous healings from family and friends, amazing healings, and I thought, well, it kind of makes sense to go into this field and devote myself to be fully trained. And my goal was to go into the field and answer calls, and that's basically what I've done. I've pursued the whole training here, and I've become journalisted.
Yes, I also have a background in education. A few years back, I was sitting with my sister reading the Bible lesson, and we were talking about how our children were grown and we had more time on our hands, and we decided that we'd like to give back to Christian Science in another way than we had been. So my sister said, I've been thinking about Christian Science nursing. And it was strange because I've been having like little nudgings of thought too about Christian Science nursing. And I said, really, Becky? I said, I have too. Filled out an application, and Ardenwood was the one that was really calling to me. So I moved from Illinois to California here, and it's been the most rewarding thing that I've done.
What is it deep down that is so fulfilling to you about this work rather than another path you could have taken with your careers?
I think for me, being able to see the different healings that have happened with some of the guests and patients that I've worked with is a very rewarding feeling, just knowing that there's a certain elevated level of healing work happening at the facility, and every nurse is involved, and prayerful work's being done, and everyone's contributing in a way to further the growth of the individual that comes in.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to see how what we learn relates when we go back home. For me, it's just, seeing everything connects together. We learn about being cheerful, compassionate, and loving, and these are skills that we need in our everyday life. So it's not just blessing at work, but everywhere we go and everyone we meet, and I think that's wonderful.
Well, I love working in an environment that promotes radical reliance on Christian Science for healing. I mean, that to me is what it's all about.
You can see that change of thought on their face, and feel the peace and the presence of the Christ. Those moments are so precious and priceless to me. So, yeah.
And how do you do that? How do you reach the patient and help to brighten their thought and lighten their day and wake them up to that healing Christ that you're all talking about?
Yeah.
We have so many resources which I'm deeply grateful for. And for me, I just usually start by reminding the patients that we are all Christian scientists, so we are all here to learn from each other and to grow.
I've been praying a prayer just lately in the morning or before I step into a patient's room. Just, dear God, let me see this situation with your eyes, and let me hear with your ears, and let me know what you know about this situation. And that helps me clear my thought, just listening.
So how important has your Christian Science Nursing Arts training been as you've prepared for this ministry?
We are taught to ensure that we give care that's safe, compassionate, and practical. So that means that we are always making assessments of patient needs and just knowing what each patient needs, so we can be able to take care of them in a way that's compassionate but also safe, so that their needs are truly met in the right way. So just seeing how the practical skills work together with what we are taught in Christian Science.
I felt like the mentoring program especially is so great because you have someone with you at all times essentially that you can draw upon for knowledge and just to have, because they're such a skilled nurse, and it's so great to see someone in action doing what you've been learning in class, and you've been working with them in class, but when you've actually made the step to transitioning to being in a room with a patient, we essentially have the choice to, we take a back seat and we watch the nurse, because they're the lead nurse and they're the mentor, do the care and take care of the patient. But at the same time, as we're watching, we're learning and growing with that.
What is it that helps you to clear your thought and prepare your thought for that Christly ministry to come forth in your work?
Well, it's about humility, actually. It's about really turning to God every morning or whenever you work, and just becoming really humble and asking God what you need to do. Where can you be of most service? And the thoughts will come as you work. And it's a constant preparation. It's not just before you go to work. While you're on the job, while you're working, you're constantly turning to God and getting that guidance and inspiration.
And that's the biggest thing I've learned throughout my nursing career is God is guiding me. God is showing me the way. That's what really touches the patient and brings healing.
What are you thinking as a Christian Science nurse? How are you beginning that ministry before you even enter the room?
For me, it's just knowing that every smile I bring, every truth I share is winged with love and promotes healing. And that provides a base for me to connect with the patients and just reminds them, oh, she's a fellow Christian Scientist. We can understand each other and quickly connect and grow from there.
Mm-hmm. We've all spoken about it being challenging and demanding, but then, you're all here and giving of your hearts and your hands to this work. So what is it that really keeps that fire burning?
Well, you always have an opportunity to bear witness to the Christ, that the healing is going on, and you always have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. For me, I've seen healings in my personal life, whether it was physical or financial, and that has just been proof that Christian Science truly works and that I really need to keep on holding on to this. And I've seen healings on the Christian Science nursing floor. When I worked at Cedars Camp as a nurse, I've seen so many great healings, and that just reminds me that regardless of the challenges, there's so much to be grateful for and to thank God, because we just keep on learning about ourselves and God through the healings that come our way. And so that helps me to keep cherishing the ministry.
Mm-hmm. I've been feeling as though it's really a spiritual adventure, and it's exciting and it's so fulfilling.
Well, I love the spontaneity of visiting Christian Science nurse service, and that's what I do a couple of times a week, and it just brings me a lot of fulfillment, helping others who aren't able to be in the facility. And so I go to their homes, and it's very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have some people who've done private duty cases. Clementine has done visiting nurse, and I've had the opportunity to go to Cedars Camp, and I think it's wonderful to see how all these different avenues serve the cause of Christian Science, just to see how we can continue promoting healing everywhere we go. It doesn't have to be in the facility. It's just so unlimited. And for me, I love to go to Cedars because I think it's fun. It teaches me that Christian Science nursing is lively, and we need to just remember that it's a joyful ministry and it has a lot of energy, and just remind the public that we can have fun and experience healing all over. It doesn't have to be this serious thing, because there's so much joy and so much love in it, because at the end of the day, Christian Science is about love.
One of the privileges of being a Christian Science nurse is to get to witness the healings, as they so eloquently shared with you today. So this is an opportunity for Shannon and I to read a few of the letters and testimonies that have been shared with us from healings that happened here at Ardenwood this year.
In November, sorry, we'll try that again. In November, my mother-in-law, who was a contented resident in sheltered care, fell while getting up from a chair. She was quickly tended to by the Christian Science nurses who called us and her practitioner to say she was resting in her room but had some discomfort in her side and leg. The practitioner lives nearby and immediately came to visit her despite the late hour. Because it was hard for her to walk, my mother-in-law was carefully moved to the Christian Science nursing floor where she could be cared for and helped during the night. The next morning, since she wasn't clear on the need to stay quiet in her bed, it was decided to have an X-ray taken at a local hospital. I was grateful for the angel message that the Christ would be with us every step of the way, and that was certainly the case. The ambulance and fire department were very accommodating and did not turn on their sirens. Instead, they quietly drove to the back entrance to wheel her out on a stretcher, the most comfortable position for her at the time. They began by asking her questions and taking her, quote, vital signs, unquote. The young man who took her blood pressure exclaimed, "I can guarantee that your blood pressure is better than mine right now." And then, when he found out that she wasn't taking any medication, nor did she wear glasses, he loudly announced to his colleagues, "I think we found God's favorite. We found her." The ambulance captain stepped into the hall with me to complete the paperwork and asked about Ardenwood. "What is this place?" None of the 8 jovial ambulance and fire department staff had been to a Christian Science facility. When I explained that it was a care facility that used Christian prayer for healing rather than medication, he put down his clipboard and quietly looked around for a moment, saying, "I can feel it. I can feel the peace here." My husband and I were grateful that Ardenwood's visiting Christian Science nurse went with us to the hospital, bringing a bag of helpful items, snacks, water, and the lesson sermon. She stayed with us, helping to keep our thoughts light and uplifted until it was determined that all was well, and my mother-in-law could return to Ardenwood. Once back at Ardenwood, my mother-in-law's healing progress was gratifying. The Christian Science nurses encouraged her to walk with the aid of a walker, and their tender care and patience were inspiring. She was soon back in shelter care, taking part in the activities and outings, attending both weekly church services at 9th Church, and even dancing in place when she heard a lively tune.
I had a completely unexpected fall that landed me flat on my face. 2 Christian Science nurses were very close by and came to my aid immediately. One thing I distinctly recall is assuring them and myself, "I'm all right, I just need to be still." That was what I wanted most, to be still. As it turned out, 5 Christian Science nurses helped move me from where I landed. It was only a few feet wide and I was pretty wedged in. The Christian Science nurses slid a slippery nylon sheet under me from toe to head, and then they lifted me out of the tight space into a wider hallway. If I ever have anything come up, the first thing I think about is, to not let thoughts flood in and frighten me. There were lots of phrases I'd been aware of forever. They just reside in my thought. So when I was faced with this fall, good thoughts came easily, and I just verbalized them. I realized I was probably saying things over and over. The more you say them, the more they take hold. I knew God was right there, right then. I felt a lot of support from the Christian Science nurses. It was great the way the male nurse was right there, ready to move me out of the wedge I was in. Everything was under control. God is always here in any situation. I felt it many times. I've tripped before, and I'm always righted right away. I was pleasantly surprised by the process of being healed. It was happening. I wasn't scared at all. I felt it. When you have those strong thoughts from God, they really take over, and other things don't develop. I wasn't hurting at all. I felt protected the whole time. Christian Science nurses have the necessary skills, and they are witnessing healing. I feel so fortunate to be here. People do nothing but support each other. I'm grateful for the healing. And from the Christian Science nurse's point of view, the whole time she expressed utter fearlessness. It was beautiful to see. There was evidence of quite a bit of bleeding from a gash on her face, but she was unaware of the wound. In fact, she was so calm and sure of her well-being. As we all prayed silently, the bleeding just ceased. There did not appear to be any other issues, so we moved her to a nursing room, cleansed and bandaged the wound, and left her to be still. She returned to her apartment later that afternoon. Over the next few days, we provided a little follow-up care to change the bandage. The wound healed completely, and even the bruising quickly faded. The fall just never touched her.
I was moving along effortlessly when the need came up. I didn't know I needed care as much as I did. I'd never had a need that strong before. I have no family, so if I'd still been living on my own, my dear next-door neighbor would have taken me the medical route. I hadn't thought about the fact that being on one's own isn't always as wise as one might think. However, in that moment of need, I was living at Ardenwood, right where the kind of help I wanted was available. I'm so grateful I came to Ardenwood. I was led here. I never thought I'd live in a place like this, a senior community. I'd been here now 7 years. The time has just flown. And I never anticipated a challenge like the one I had. God provided exactly what I needed: a home, a family, and instant access to Christian Science care. It's just amazing to me that God guided me here. I'm still working on walking a longer distance and gaining more strength, but each step is evidence of healing progress. I was totally helpless at the start. For the first 2 weeks, I was fighting the care routine. For instance, I had to wake up at a certain time. I'm not used to that. I have night owl tendencies, and I fought the alarm clock every day of my school and working life. But there are certain schedules that Christian Science nurses have to follow, and patients have to go along with. I finally made my peace with that because the Christian Science nurses are all so loving. This need gave me a first-hand look at Christian Science nursing. The Christian Science nurses have to keep thought uplifted no matter what they see. When they arrived at my door in the morning, they always had some good message to share. I had a wonderful opportunity to love every one of them, male and female. They were so thoughtful, sweet, and dedicated, so helpful and uplifting. I just loved them. And now I truly see that God is one Father and loves each of us exactly the same. A couple of nights, it crossed my mind that I might pass on, but I resisted, saying to myself again and again, I'm not going down into the pit, a biblical reference for the grave. I thought, I'll defeat this for the glory of God. I have things to finish. I was grateful to wake up every morning. My prayer was, please, God, take care of me until I'm finished. I got very close to God. I talked to him like my own personal father. The people who started Ardenwood had foresight to provide this place where everyone is cared for so lovingly. I wish all Christian Scientists knew about the services that are available and how valuable it is to have Christian Science nursing care right here, under the same roof where you live, when any emergency arises. I'm so grateful for Ardenwood and to be a part of it.
And this is a letter that I received just last week. Dear Leslie, my heart is overflowing with gratitude for Ardenwood, for the inspiration and joy you brought to each conversation and step of progress, for the harmony expressed by all of the nurses, and for the healing effect of the kindness, hope, love, strength, comfort, equanimity, encouragement, patience, humor, devotion, skill, and more, expressed by the nurses and staff. I am also grateful to be gaining a greater understanding of and appreciation for Mary Baker Eddy's provision for nursing as an indispensable element in the practice of Christian Science and the progress of the movement in blessing mankind. With so much love.
Thank you, Leslie and Shannon. So inspiring. The testimonies tie in beautifully with our theme today, The Way Leads Upward. Love to hear those. Ardenwood supports the Christian Science field through services designed for you to meet your needs for practical and skillful care, comfort, inspiration, and healing. Our prayer each day is from Mrs. Eddy's poem, Christ My Refuge. We all know it. Some daily good to do, to thine for thee, an offering pure of love, whereto God leadeth me, or leadeth Ardenwood. This is what inspires us to provide the kind of quality experience you'll remember and return for, an experience you can count on. I want to briefly circle back to a testimony that Shannon just shared when she recently had a number of ambulance techs and firefighters. That's a lot of people. They had sent 8 people here to take one of our guests for an x-ray. The captain asked, as you heard, what is this place? You know, we literally get that question every day here. Literally every day. From delivery people, like FedEx or whomever, contractors, neighbors. When explaining that we rely fully on Christianly scientific prayer rather than on medical treatment for healing, you'll recall what the captain said. I can feel it. I can feel the peace here. That's also what we hear every day. And that's what we want to be sure you are feeling each time you come to Ardenwood. I think we can all agree these are challenging times. Materia Medica continues to claim that man is material, sick, diseased, degenerating. It's difficult to compete with their marketing dollars and 24/7 wall-to-wall messaging. But these times are also filled with great promise. Thanks to that irrepressible, still small voice of truth, which we know from our leader, is, quote, indeed adequate to unclasp the hold and to destroy disease, sin, and death, end quote. And from Psalms, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Next to the marginal heading, childlike receptivity, in our textbook, Mrs. Eddy writes, the effects of Christian Science are not so much seen as felt. It is the still small voice of truth uttering itself. We are either turning away from this utterance or we are listening to it and going up higher. We are listening. Ardenwood is a charitable, nonprofit organization. Charitable and nonprofit means we depend on those who use our services, as well as our donors, to meet our annual expenses. That connection is intentional. We're tied together, organization and donor, donor and organization, for as long as Ardenwood exists. In other words, we need each other. Where is Ardenwood headed in this new year? Actually, we're entering our 90th year. Construction was well underway at this exact time in 1929. And we're already planning for our centennial just 10 years from now. In a few short weeks, we'll begin to renew our buildings and to replace old infrastructure, like our furnace, power and ventilation systems. This is really exciting. It really is. It really is. And even our elevators next year. As one example, you'll notice the difference in the air quality and temperature. We'll notice the difference in lower utility bills. We're also adding a new service, one that we've talked about before, and we're finally getting underway. We're preparing to open a wing on our 4th floor to care for loved ones facing mental impositions. Our consultants tell us it'll be ready the end of next year, 2020. So looking November, December of next year. We welcome your metaphysical support for this important project. As I stand before you, our Christian Science nurses are fully engaged with patients on our 2nd floor, right there, just as they have been every single day since 1930. To do this and to maintain our current care services, we must recruit, train, and retain excellent Christian Science nurses. That requires, and some of us you've heard today, that requires on-site housing, that's affordable and inviting. We're in the midst of planning for that too. So how can you help? Well, come often, just like you did today. Cherish this unique setting and healing environment which is available to any student of Christian Science. I am constantly surprised at the number of people that have never been to Ardenwood or don't even know about Ardenwood that are lifelong Christian Scientists. And please give what you can. Every gift makes a difference, every single gift. For instance, as Florence just mentioned, we'd love you to join our matching challenge to raise $200,000 in support of our Christian Science Nurses Training Program. We need more Christian Science nurses, and this is, we feel, the best training program you can take part in. Funds given will be matched dollar for dollar. The challenge starts today and continues through the end of July. And finally, keep your eyes and ears open for fellow Christian Scientists who would benefit from Christian Science nursing care. If you're working with your care committee or something like that at your branch church or know of someone, or making this their home, it was indicated by Nancy and Marianne so beautifully, or anyone who might be drawn to become a Christian Science nurse who has a heart for service, we would love your referrals. Some are just out of school, some are mid-career, but keep your eyes and ears open, please. The essence of Ardenwood is healing through the practice, the demonstration of Christian Science through wholehearted reliance on God for every need. That's what we're all about. That's why you're here today, and we could not be more grateful. Thank you for coming. This concludes the business portion of our meeting. Let's sing another hymn, shall we, before we introduce our speaker? This is one we all know and love from our leader, Mary Baker Eddy. Shepherd, show me how to go, o'er the hillside steep, how to gather, how to sow, how to feed thy sheep. I will listen for thy voice, lest my footsteps stray. I will follow and rejoice all the rugged way. Thou wilt bind the stubborn will, wound the callous breast, make self-righteousness be still, break earth's stupid rest. Strangers on a barren shore, laboring long and lone, we would enter by the door, and thou know'st thine own. So when day grows dark and cold, tear or triumph harms, lead thy lambkins to the fold, take them in thine arms. Feed the hungry, heal the heart, till the morning's beam, white as wool ere they depart. Shepherd, wash them clean. Hymn 305.
Strangers on a barren shore, laboring long and low, we would enter thy home, and thou knowest thine own. So when day grows dark and cold, tear or triumph harms, feed thy lambkins to the fold, take them in thine arms. Feed the hungry, heal the heart, till the morning's gleam, white as wool where they depart. Shepherd, wash them clean.
Boy, that sounded nice. Now I'd like to introduce to you our guest speaker. Dr. Tom Fuller has taught computer science, math, and engineering at Principia College in Elsa, Illinois for 3 decades. He has served as faculty senate president and for 1 year as acting president of the college. Tom has written for the Christian Science periodicals and for professional books and journals. He was the project manager for the original Concord study package, released in 1988. How cool is that? How has that changed our lives? An avid nature lover, Tom has led bird walks at Principia and has photographed over 500 bird species. All the photographs in this slide presentation, and that's why we're The room is darkened here for those who aren't in the auditorium. Seeing a lot of slides here. All the photographs are his own, except for those taken from space, which came from NASA. Tom has long served as Associate Director of Principia's Astronomical Observatory, guiding hundreds of visitors to the wonders of our galaxy. I was one of them last year. It was amazing. Currently, he is a trustee of Peace Haven, our sister facility in St. Louis, and is first reader at his branch church. Please join me now in welcoming Dr. Tom Fuller and his talk, Upbuilding Church and Its Activities.
Thank you, John. I've never been able to figure out these computer things. You'll have to give me some time here. I think it's a passing fad. I don't think they're going to catch on. Okay. So how much cord have we got here, Joe? How much do you need? I think we're okay. More than that. I need a little more here. Yep. Oops. Well, if it doesn't work out, I can just tell some fishing stories or something here. We'll be okay. How about that? Okay. I can do that. How about that? There we go. Okay. Anybody recognize that? Now the real question is, where was I standing when I took that picture? I don't want you to get too high an estimate of my metaphysics there. I was in a boat, yes. Okay. That should look familiar also. If it doesn't, I'm in the wrong building at the wrong time here. Well, thanks for letting me be here. Thanks for being here with me. And thanks to John for inviting me back despite the talk I gave here some years ago. My wife's mom lived here for a while. I visited this wonderful facility a number of times, and I've received Christian Science nursing care here. It's a great privilege to share this time with you. Hey, give me a second here to get organized. Arden Wood is really more than a building, though, isn't it? It is a beautiful building, but it's also an idea, as we heard so richly from those who have spoken of this already. The peace, the care, the light that is felt even by ambulance captains. It speaks to that invisible part of the building. It speaks to Arden Wood as an idea. And we'll have lots more to say about that later. Now, you've probably been wondering about the title of the talk. Upbuilding Church, is that even a word? I'm kind of wondering about it myself. I was struck by Mrs. Eddy's description of the first Church of Christ Scientist. She said, it's designed to be built on the rock, Christ. Even the understanding and demonstration of divine truth, life, and love. Healing and saving the world from sin and death. Thus reflect in some degree the Church universal and triumphant. Well, I think we're all pretty clear about building on the rock. As Jesus taught, unless we build on the rock, if we end up building on sand, the building won't withstand the storms. Lawrence Doyle observed a number of years ago in one of his talks that sand is just a lot of tiny rocks, quartz, in fact. If we build on the oneness of mind, the onlyness of mind, we're building on the rock Christ. If we build on the assumption that there are many little minds with shifting opinions and differing expectations and natterings, we're building on sand, a perfect recipe for getting washed away in the next storm. So we get that part of the definition. But why designed to be built? Isn't church already built? Are we done yet? Mrs. Eddy says in the chapter Genesis of Science and Health, creation is ever appearing and must ever continue to appear from the nature of its inexhaustible source. Mortal sense inverts this appearing and calls ideas material. So if God creates church, and of course he does, it must be that in truth, church also is ever appearing, ever unfolding, even while material sense calls it a structure, a thing, a done deal, so to speak. Speaking of the original edifice, Mrs. Eddy wrote in miscellaneous writings, the diviner claim and means for upbuilding the Church of Christ were prospered. Built on the rock, our church will stand the storms of ages. The first Church of Christ scientists, our prayer in stone, will be the prophecy fulfilled, the monument upreared of Christian Science. End of her quote. Upbuilding is a verb, so is upreared. Perhaps these verbs point to the continuing activity of church building, the creation that is ever appearing and must ever continue to appear. To that end, it's time to take a closer look at nouns and verbs. William Safire. Anyone know William Safire? Not many. He's won some Pulitzer Prizes for his political writing, and he's widely recognized as a grammar expert. He writes a column on language in the New York Times. He wrote a delightful little book for writers called Fumble Rules. Each of the 50 fumble rules contradicts itself to make a point. Here's some examples. Verbs has to agree with their subjects. What? Isn't that right? Don't use no double negatives. Never use a long word when a diminutive one will do. One of my personal favorites, don't verb nouns. In fact, I considered the talk, but John probably never would let me get away with it. Don't noun verbs. As I said earlier, this beautiful building is more than just a beautiful building. It's also an idea. Okay, when you were given the list of my citations, on the back of it, there's a quiz. I'm a college professor, so I give quizzes. I can't help it. I'm going to give you a word building, and I'll give you a few sentences. You've got to circle, is it a noun or a verb? Here's your first sentence. We are building a church. Okay, noun or verb, noun or verb. Okay, and you can just say it out loud. What do you think? Oh, you got lucky, okay. Next one. We're in a church building. No, not so bad. We're in the church building, building church. Yeah, you got it, both. Sometimes physical exercise, like lifting weights and so forth, is called bodybuilding. Mrs. Eddy had something else in mind in this report on one of her sermons. The report ran that in her early training, through a misinterpretation of the word, it had been a cause of years of invalidism on Mrs. Eddy's part. With the understanding of Scripture meanings had come physical rejuvenation. The uplifting of spirit was the upbuilding of the body. So what is the work of building church? It's already a structure, of course. It's the structure of truth and love. It rests upon and proceeds from its infinite principle. and as experienced, witnessed by humanity, as we've heard already today. The church is that institution, comma, important comma. It is that institution which affords proof of its utility and is found elevating the race, rousing the dormant understanding from material beliefs to the apprehension of spiritual ideas and the demonstration of divine science, thereby casting out devils or error and healing the sick. Now, have you ever heard someone say, I'm spiritual, or I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not interested in institutional religion? You ever hear that? I thought so. Yeah. Have you ever thought that yourself? Okay. You don't have to raise your hands on that one. Perhaps a person saying that feels cramped by rules, by structure. Perhaps they want their truth unstructured, natural, individual, tailored to their ideas, not defined or limited by others. It made me think, what gives a tree structure? Well, roots, trunk, branches, and so forth. What would a tree be without structure? A leaf pile. Then, because I have done some fishing in my life, what would a fish be without structure? Would kind of be like an amoeba with scales. Without, actually, even amoeba has structure. Amoeba couldn't even move without structure. But these statements about institutionalized religion that seem so current kind of paint the word institution with unwanted graffiti. As a whiff of stodgy, boring, old, rigid, so forth. Of course, if we eliminate these qualities in our thought, they can't possibly appear in our church. So, is church building a noun or a verb? Could we think of the word institution as the act of instituting, as something that continues, that is active, that is present? I wonder if that's why Mrs. Eddy didn't use the obvious noun institute in her definition. Another thing that struck me when I was preparing the talk, have you ever noticed that the words institute and substitute look a lot alike? Ever wondered what that means? Well, I looked them up. In law, the first heir to whom an estate is given is the institute, the first heir, the proper heir. If the first heir is no longer available, the estate passes to a secondary heir, a substitute. Thus, our church is the intended heir of truth and love. It's the original. It is not a substitute. We might say it's the instituting, the institution or constituting of principle, a continuing unfolding of truth and love in human experience. It's a verb just as much as it's a noun, maybe more so. More to say about that. And a question to raise when we hear those saying, yeah, I'm looking for more freedom. Could there be any freedom outside the structure of truth, the very truth that makes free? The quiz continues. You have 4 more here. These will be on the final exam. Love. Is love a noun or verb? Both. So without a context, you can't tell. Are you in love? Which is it, noun or verb? Noun. The in's the preposition. Did you fall in love? Noun. Good so far. Or perhaps in love, lowercase, and in love, uppercase. Both nouns. A student once asked Mrs. Eddy, do you love me? Mrs. Eddy pointed to the stove in the room. She said, do you see the stove? It warms. I love. Verb or noun? Definitely a verb. And look at all the verbs in the definition of church. Affording proof, proving, elevating, cleansing, rousing, stirring, casting out, healing. And then look how that definition corresponds with the seal of Christian Science. Have you ever noticed that? Elevating the race, cleansing those most in need of cleansing, rousing the dormant, raising the dead or sleeping, casting out devils, and healing the sick. Grand and powerful verbs, every one. Isn't this verb-centered flavor of church hinted in the church manual when it describes it as designed to be built? Building is a verb, a doing, not a done deal noun. Time for a story. This gives me a chance to sneak in bird pictures here. I've got over 500. This may take a while. One morning, I was praying by a picture window. A little bird mistook reflection for sky and crashed hard into the glass. Going outside, I found a motionless, crumpled form under the window. Ironically, I had just been praying with two synonyms for God, life and principle. And I declared that the only life was God, was principle. So life could not be fragmented or deformed. That would be unprincipled. And since principle is life, no principle-sustained idea could accidentally fail or die. It lives. And this principle is not some lifeless cold principle like the principle of hydraulics. This principle is life itself. It's expressed, it lives, it moves, it has being. It sustains, supports, and upbuilds. The lie of accident and injury was rejected. It was set aside. It couldn't be. And as I felt the truth of this thinking, this situation naturally corresponded. The bird stirred, got up on his legs, couple minutes, flew away, demonstrating the vitality and healing power of life, of its principle. You could say the bird became less of a noun and more of a verb. I wouldn't say that, of course, but you could. But this wasn't the end of the story. I had a wonderful feeling of impending good. The feeling that this healing pointed to a continuously operating principle, that I would revisit that principle, that promise, later that day. And we notice, of course, that the word foundation, the foundation of our church, can be thought of as a verb too, as the founding, the ongoing founding of church, pointing to Mrs. Eddy's continuing role as the continuing founder of Christian Science. So more to come on this channel. As long as we're talking about building, what shapes appear in God's architecture? In the superstructure we're building on this foundation. Lines, planes, rectangles. Mrs. Eddy writes in Miscellaneous Writings, Christian Science translates mind, God, to mortals. It is the infinite calculus, defining the line, plane, space, and fourth dimension of spirit. And of course, the city foursquare in Revelation is another example of inspired architecture. But I'd like to suggest another primary structure in God's architecture, the sphere. It's time for the geometry lesson. You knew that, right? Everyone knew that? I mean, if you hire a math teacher to give a talk, what do you expect? Okay. Mind is perpetual motion. This is Mrs. Eddy in Science and Health. Mind is perpetual motion. Its symbol is the sphere. The rotations and revolutions of the universe of mind go on eternally. The real life, or mind, and its opposite, the so-called material life and mind, are figured by two geometrical symbols, a circle or sphere and a straight line. The circle, continuing Mrs. Eddy's quote, the circle represents the infinite without beginning or end. The straight line represents the finite, which has both beginning and end. The sphere represents good, the self-existent and eternal individuality, or mind. The straight line represents evil, a belief in a self-made and temporary material existence. And that's the end of her quote. Now, modern geometry teachers would call this a line segment. It has a beginning, it has an end. Is this a good model for the building that we've been talking about? Well, I don't think so. You notice there's a place where there isn't a line, and then the line is suddenly created and lives for a while, and then all of a sudden there is no more, runs out, beginning, end. This is the mortal model, isn't it? It's the model of birth, growth, maturity, decrepitude, decay, and death. Whether we apply this to a person, a body, a building, or a church, it's still just the mortal model. Mrs. Eddy asks in recapitulation, question, what is error? And includes in the answer, error is a supposition that pleasure and pain, that intelligence, substance, life are existent in matter. It is that which seemeth to be and is not. End of her quote. Now, who here has heard the expression, you're just handing me a line? Anybody ever heard that? What does it mean if they say, you're just handing me a line? Well, it means you're being handed a lie, a mortal model, a beginning and end. Now, what holds the lie? What contains the lie? Well, it's in belief. It's not a thing. It's not an actuality. It's that which begins and ends. In fact, included in Mrs. Eddy's answer about what is error, she says, quote, error is a belief without understanding. And that's the end of her quote. Now, a circle or a sphere is entirely different. Where's the start of a circle? Point to the start. Well, or the end? Continuous being, unfoldment of already existing, always existing, ever existing being. Now, one thing you can do on a line, because it is a line, you can order things. You can say, okay, A is at the beginning, B is between A and C, and B comes before C. Or even better or worse, you can say A is above B, and B is above C. C is underneath everything. Try that with a circle. Who's on top? Well, it's not exactly clear. Is B between A and C? Well, you could get from A to C without going through B. There's no sense of linearity, of ordering, of rank, of judgmental comparison in a circle or a sphere. Now, here a line segment appears to be touching a circle. But as Mrs. Eddy stated, eternal mind and temporary material existence never unite in figure or in fact. So if we magnify the circle more and more closely, they look close, but at any magnification, the line only touches a circle at a single point. Now, if you can remember back to your last geometry class, how big is a point? About 1/8 of an inch? 1/millionth of an inch? How big is a point? 0. Exactly 0. So how much does the line have in common with the circle? Exactly nothing. Similarly, Mrs. Eddy writes, matter has no place in spirit, and spirit has no place in matter. Truth has no home in error, and error has no foothold in truth. Even though they seem to touch, one is still a curve, and the other a straight line. Now, if we spin a circle, we make a sphere. And as Mrs. Eddy notes, the sphere also has no beginning, no end, no ordering. What's the radius of mind as sphere? It is infinite. The radius is infinite, which means what? It means each one of us is always at the exact center of mind, and that in every direction, mind extends infinitely far. Who's at the center of mind? Everyone. Mrs. Eddy writes, God is at once the center and circumference of being. Now, one of our newest hymns, hymn 591, was actually a poem by Peter Henniker Heaton, that voices some of this everywhereness, this sphere of infinite radius. We cannot turn away from God, because whichever way we face, Spirit is there in every place, every direction, everywhere. Spirit is there. Whether we turn to left or right, to north or south or east or west, we meet with love and we are blessed. Upward or down, below, above, we meet with love. This also corresponds to the city foursquare. The length and the breadth and the height of it, 12,000 furlongs, 1,500 miles. And in Revelation we read, the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it. For the glory of God did light in it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. And Mrs. Eddy amplifies that in Science and Health. She writes, its gates open towards light and glory both within and without, for all is good. And nothing can enter that city which defileth or maketh a lie. No lines. Light within and light without. The sphere of light filling all space, all thought. That is an impenetrable shield in every direction against the so-called powers of darkness. Darkness has no weapon against light and cannot defend itself against light. Imagine an arrow or a bullet or a germ made entirely of darkness. What happens as it enters light? Vanished. Can't help it. Now, a little side note here. When I was in college, my druggy college friends tried to convince me of all I was missing by not doing drugs. And they finally gave me their best shot. One afternoon in the dorm, they said, but Tom, have you ever seen the universe from the outside? And I said, no, and neither have you. There is no outside. Likewise, there's no outside to life, to mind, to love. There's no outsider. No one can be outside the infinite radius of this mind, this truth, this good, this light. So that concludes today's geometry lesson. Now, since I'm a teacher, I have to assess learning. Did you get any useful ideas out of the geometry lesson? If so, please raise your hand. This affects my stipend. This is important. Okay. Yeah, John, did you get a picture? Okay, good. And it's now time for the astronomy lesson. If you hire the associate director of the astronomical observatory, what do you expect? Oh, well. Here's one of my personal favorite spheres. Anyone recognize this sphere? It's the sun. By the way, what's the nickname for the sun? Soul. Ah, good. Extra point, extra credit. Yeah. By the way, as John mentioned, these pictures are by NASA. I wish I had taken these, but no, I haven't gotten up there yet. Time for imagination. Imagine you're a ray of light coming from the sun, shining out from the sun, out into space. You might shine on Earth at some point, although the Earth is kind of a moving target. How fast is the Earth moving around its orbit around the sun? Extra credit question. Pretty close, 67,000 miles an hour, very close. Okay, you can skip the final exam. So, here's a picture of the sun, picture of the Earth. We're above them. We're above the North Pole, about 1 million miles above the North Pole, looking down at the Earth, going around the sun and the little beam shining out. And actually, this is not to scale. The sun would have to be way, way further away, and the Earth would be way, way smaller. But it gives the idea. Now, as the Earth is whipping around at 67,000 miles an hour, it's getting closer, closer, getting closer, closer. Almost. Now what's happened? That beam that was shining out into space is now shining on the Earth. But how much difference does that make to a sunbeam? Have you ever thought about the identity of a sunbeam? It's millions of colors, several million that we can see, 1 billion more colors that we can't see, ultraviolet, infrared, and so forth and so on. And all of that warmth, that radiance, that delight sparkles, scintillates every single second. That identity remains the same, whether it's shining on the earth or shining someplace else. The sunbeam just beams away. Okay, now we're still above the North Pole, but we're closer. You can see the North Pole here. And the ray, the beam shining out from the sun is going to trace a path across the earth as it gradually moves, as the earth is moving by the beam. And now we shifted our perspective. We're kind of looking at the earth sort of from the sun's direction, but we're a lot closer to the earth than the sun is. And here the earth has moved into the beam. Now the beam just touches the earth. And as the earth zips by at 67,000 miles an hour, the beam moves across the surface. How long will that sunbeam rest on the earth? It kind of depends on how fast or where it hits on the earth. It doesn't pass on the speed because that doesn't change. Well, if the beam hit the earth right at the equator, it would take about 7 minutes for the earth to move through the beam, beginning to end, gone. Now, if the sunbeam hit a little higher on the earth, if it went through San Francisco, St. Louis, etc., well, the earth isn't as wide up there. About 5.5 minutes, the beam is gone. And if the beam landed right at almost the North Pole, it may only shine on the earth for a few seconds. Does this make a difference to the beam? No. It shines, it scintillates, it shares its millions, billions of colors, constantly scintillating, glowing, changing, evolving. It doesn't matter where it's shining. It's reminiscent of hymn 14, arise, arise and shine, on thee hath dawned the day. God is thy sun, and Christ thy light. Be thou a steadfast ray. And thinking about Mrs. Eddy's hymn, as we are Christ-like, we are a gentle beam of living love. Time for another story. I had a beautiful and talented high school friend who was just filled with earthly promise. She was known as the best young operatic voice in Virginia. She actually had a leading role in a local opera at the age of 15. She was second runner-up for Miss Virginia. She loved children and delighted them with her Donald Duck voice, better than Donald Duck himself. Get those kids giggling. While driving in Western Virginia one morning, I heard of her passing, that she had passed on the radio. As I drove through the woods, I felt an overwhelming sense of tragic loss and emptiness. She was so young, barely in college, and she had so much to offer. As tears made driving difficult, I stopped by the roadside in the silent forest and prayed for understanding and comfort. Love quietly sent me an astronomy angel. Wasn't that nice of love? I noticed streams of sunlight shining through the misty morning forest. This precious angel touched me with the question, what's the source of these luminous rays? I answered, I thought, it's the sun. These graceful beams are shining out from the sun, left the sun 8 minutes ago. The angel asked again, where were these rays several minutes ago? It was just after morning, it's just after dawn. I knew the earth must be just turning into the sun, since it's moving so briskly along. Several minutes ago, these rays of light were shining out into deep space. And then after the earth has moved past the rays, they'll be shining far out into space again. Perhaps they only land on the earth for 5.5 minutes. And if a ray happened to land close to the North Pole, it may only touch the earth for a few seconds. The angel message became clearer. All the beauty and grace and music, and even the Donald Duck voice that made kids giggle, those were qualities shining directly out from soul. These qualities and the exact representation of them that I knew as that opera singer had always been shining out from father-mother love, and they always would. Not only are those qualities always expressed, but they're always seen, appreciated, and loved. They're always delighting others, because man is both the manifestation and the object of God's affection. And my friend's spiritual identity, the substance of her being, would always be safe, whole, perfect, loved in God. Again, from Science and Health, continuing our definition of man, let us remember that harmonious and immortal man has existed forever and is always beyond and above the mortal illusion of any life, substance, and intelligence as existent in matter. Even if the ray touched the earth near the North Pole for just seconds, it would have existed forever, and it will remain its radiant self forever, and every other beam would delight in it. Only the lie of time would suggest that we start one minute and end another. We or our friends or church or any building verb that we're doing. That was never God's view of our work or our being, any more than 7 minutes of earthfall is the sun's view of one of its rays. In a paragraph with a marginal heading, The Divine Loveliness, Mrs. Eddy writes in Science and Health, being possesses its qualities before they are perceived humanly. Beauty is a thing of life which dwells forever in the eternal mind and reflects the charms of his goodness in expression, form, outline, and color. That's the end of her quote. And by the way, the piece of paper that you're holding has all of the quotes, all the sources there. At that moment, I felt the nearness and dearness of God's specific love for me and for my friend. I felt lifted and warmed and satisfied, basking in the unquenchable light of life. What a generous and glorious answer God had sent to my questing prayer, and how thoughtful love was to send me an astronomy angel. And I share that angel with you today. But there's more. We don't relate to each other by our own efforts or our own organization or heredity or by the line of time. We're joined at the hip, as they say, or perhaps more accurately, we're joined at the sun, or as one of you said a minute ago, we're joined at our very soul with each other. I am joined to that opera singer and to every one of God's children by my very soul, and so are you. So is all of church. There cannot be a discordant relationship in church or anywhere. Joined at the soul, joined at the mind, assures perfect harmony, even with limitless originality and individuality. And as you've pointed out, soul is soul. Great metaphor. Wish I'd thought of it. Again, from Mrs. Eddy, the sinless joy, the perfect harmony and immortality of life, possessing unlimited divine beauty and goodness without a single bodily pleasure or pain, constitutes the only veritable, indestructible man whose being is spiritual. It also constitutes the only veritable, indestructible church whose building is spiritual. Verb. Here's another friend joined at the soul. His name is Gil Ives. He was perhaps my closest birding buddy. We've been birding more times than I can count. He gave a testimony in the Elsa Church that touched me deeply. He has passed off the earth. His beam passed off some years ago, and his son has passed off the earth. But I was able to find his granddaughter a month ago. She had never heard her granddad's testimony. I was so grateful to hear it. And I asked if it would be okay to share it with you today, and she said, of course. So here it comes. Gil fought in World War II. He was captured by the Nazis and thrown into a prison camp. The conditions were unthinkably bad. Over 100 men were jammed into a cell that might barely have allowed a dozen or two of them to lie down. The sanitation was dreadful. The stench was worse. Disease was rampant. A viciously contagious disease found its way into the prison cell. Men caught it and died in a day or two. The prison guards would drag the bodies out every morning. Gill was a devout Christian Scientist at this time and prayed for himself and prayed for his fellow prisoners constantly. Nonetheless, he caught the disease. He was soon very sick, very close to death. He was passing in and out of consciousness. In a lucid moment, he had the thought, if only I could call a Christian Science practitioner, I could be healed. An angel message came. There are very many Christian Science practitioners praying for man all around the world, in the United States, in Germany, in Japan. They are praying for those in service, and they are praying for peace. A second message came to his thought. You are that man. These prayers are effective, and you can see the results. Gill says, I was healed in 2 hours. I never lost consciousness again since that time. This was more than 60 years ago when he gave the testimony. I came home not long thereafter when the prison camp was liberated by the Allies and completed the recovery, but I never lost consciousness again. And I declare for myself constantly, prayer is effective, and I can see the results. Think of the word nurse. By the way, is that a noun or a verb? Both? Just as surely as there were and are Christian Science practitioners praying, watching, healing at every hour, there are surely Christian Science nurses doing so as well. A Peace Haven friend, not a Christian Scientist, although he loved to have Christian Scientists babysit his children, had occasions to watch Christian Science nurses. He was amazed at their coordination, their quickness, their mental and physical athleticism. He commented on their ability to come into a room where there was a need, all fresh, not riveted to the condition, but alert, mentally awake, ready to determine the tactical need, make a plan, take the steps required, and then move on to the next one. He said, and I love this comment, it's the reason I'm telling this story, this is the Navy SEAL Team 6 of the Christian Science movement. That's not bad. That's pretty good. I think the Navy SEALs would be proud, frankly. I think Gill would too. Mrs. Eddy observes that Jesus introduced the teaching and practice of Christianity in an age of ecclesiastical despotism. That was his age. Are we in such an age? Are we introducing the teaching and practice of Christian Science in an age of ecclesiastical despotism? Well, maybe our ecclesia, our prevailing church, is the Church of Materia Medica. I noticed a radiology clinic in St. Louis has large stained glass windows in its huge lobby. That got my attention. And what Mrs. Eddy called our systematized centers are daily on the front line to free mankind from that despotism. Christian Science nurses are at the ready 24/7, 365, as we've heard wonderfully just a few minutes ago. Trained, prepared, alert, ready to meet the need. In homes, facilities, schools, camps, our SEAL teams are always at their post, and we are grateful. And we are most grateful when we go and do likewise. We all can pray for the world, as we heard again just a few minutes ago. Now, speaking of 24/7, 365, those are all measures of time. Time is another example of being handed a line. Have you been handed a line about time? It's definitely got limits, befores and afters. Yep, sounds like a line to me. Eternity, on the other hand, is not linear. It must be a sphere. Yep, you can skip the exam also. As we keep thought in tune with the infinite, we're building on eternity. As Mrs. Eddy wrote to her students, this is in Miss Lane's writings, quote, "My noble students who are loyal to Christ to truth and human obligations will not be disheartened. They build for time and eternity." And then in First Church of Christ Science and Miscellany, remember that a temple but foreshadows the idea of God, the house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Okay, next to last question on the quiz. What is this building and where is it? That's the last question on the quiz. If this will be graded. And not hearing any answers. The chapel? No. It's louder.
It's a castle.
A castle? Nice guess, but no. It's sort of like a castle. It looks a little like a castle. It's a wall. Ooh, somebody said wall. Not the great. In Israel. You're so close. This is the wall around Jerusalem. Now, it's been built and rebuilt several times, but the stones close to the base, you look down close there, those stones date back more than 2,500 years. Guess who probably handled some of those stones? Nehemiah. Those same stones. They were there. Now, Nehemiah also had to deal with time robbers, handing him a line. Reading from Nehemiah. And this is Nehemiah speaking, first person. "Then said I unto them, Ye see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come, and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more reproach. Then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, Let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. But when Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the servant, the Ammonite, and Geshem, the Arabian, heard it, they laughed us to scorn and despised us, and said, What is this thing that ye will do? What is this thing that ye do? Will ye rebel against the king? Then answered I them, and said unto them, The God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we his servants will arise and build, but ye have no portion, nor right, nor memorial in Jerusalem. Now listen to how he counteracted the time robbers. Portion implies what? No portion implies no present occupancy. Right implies what? If you have a right, you have a claim in the future. No future. Memorial implies what? A past occupancy. He was denying evil a past, a present, or a future. He shattered his claim to power or presence and opened the way for the upbuilding that followed. You remember the introduction that opens way to the Bible lesson every Sunday, affirming its application to all ages, past, present, and future. And we're also regularly reminded to daily watch and pray to be delivered from all evil, from prophesying, judging, condemning. Yeah, they're more counseling, influencing, and being influenced erroneously. But think about those first three. Erroneous prophecy is pointing to a misunderstanding of the future. A misjudgment, judging erroneously, is pointing to a misunderstanding of the present. And condemning erroneously would be a misunderstanding of the past. So in all these ways, we're counteracting these thoughts. As Mrs. Eddy put it in the chapter Teaching Christian Science, judge not the future advancement of Christian Science by the steps already taken, lest you yourself be condemned for failing to take the first step. Can we always take the first step? Of course. Now, one of the healings and fruitage, I love reading the healings and fruitage. They are for the assurance and encouragement of the reader. So if you ever need assurance and encouragement, there's a chapter for you. This testifier said, I will never forget this morning, the forever coming of Christ to consciousness. And this metaphor of morning, of dawn, appears so often in the Bible and in so many places in our literature. There's an example, it was written by Julia Michael Johnson. It's written in the third person, but it describes her father and her father and her. It was in the series called Elizabeth and Andy, if you remember that. Some do, yes. Okay, this is quoting now, Mrs. Johnson. Her dad awoke her well before dawn one morning and asked if she wanted to see God's power. She eagerly arose, got dressed, and walked with her dad to the apple orchard. As dawn drew close, her dad explained that God's power is like the sunrise. There is no noise, no pushing, no fighting, no destruction with it. It is so gentle that a blade of grass cannot be hurt by its touch, and yet so mighty that nothing can stop it. The light, as it unfolds, touches everything that you can see and much that you cannot see. Wherever it comes, the darkness goes. The dawning is so still, so beautiful, so sure, so near, as is the power of God. And that's the end of Mrs. Johnson's quote. I love to watch dawn. I love to take pictures of it. And I know how fast it approaches. If next morning, as it's coming toward dawn, think about how quickly the earth is rotating around toward the dawn. 800 miles an hour in San Francisco. Faster than the speed of sound. The dawn is approaching. Now, imagine if all 7.7 billion of Earth's citizens yelled at the top of their voice, "There is no light." By how much would that delay dawn? A second? No. Nothing can delay our individual or collective advance into the light, the current running heavenward, nor the collective advance of church into the light, not by a second. And the lesson we heard this morning reminded us that God's compassion is new every morning. At this speed, we effortlessly leave fear and resistance far behind. Now, we interrupt this presentation for an interview with one of our city's most distinguished citizens. This is Mr. 2+2. Doubtless have heard of him. Good day, 2+2. Hi, Tom. So 2+2, how's life treating you these days? Well, frankly, not so well, Tom. As you know, I used to be 4. Now in my good days, I'm barely 3.7. Last week, the best I managed was about 3.1. Sorry to hear that, 2+2. Say, I see a photo on the mantle. Tell me about that. Yeah, that's me in my youth when I was on the crew. I was rowing in position 4, as you can see. Oh, those were wonderful days. I was 4 every day, all day, right as rain. It's been a long time since I was 4, though. Well, I guess age catches up with all of us. I can see you're getting a little gray on top. Yeah, I know. If this keeps up in a few years, I'll be down to 2.8 and all too soon, probably 0. Well, thank you for the interview, 2+2, and there it ends. What's wrong with this picture? What's impossible about the picture? Can 2+2 ever become anything but 4? No. Why not? Because it is an idea. The idea of 2+2 can never become anything but the idea 4. An idea doesn't age. You are an idea. We are all ideas. Church is an idea. We don't exist in the confine of line, the entwining vine of time. We only exist in mind, in eternity. And our church building verb only exists in eternity, designed to be built. It's not in a line. It's as timeless as truth. An almost final story. Good news, isn't it? Yeah, okay, we're coming. Had a friend interested in philosophy and later in Christian Science. I shared Science and Health with him. We talked about it sometimes. He was fascinated with the concept of eternity, but had a hard time grasping it, as do we all, I suspect. After many attempts to explain it, an odd new approach came to my thought. I told him that the general notion of eternity is a long timeline, a sort of stretched out sequence of seconds, hours, days, years, centuries. It came to me to say eternity is entirely different from a line. If time is blue, eternity is not a really, really, really lot of blue. Eternity is yellow. It's completely different from time. It's just yellow. This latched on to something inside him. He got it. He was deeply grateful. Years later, when he would send me a letter, anybody remember letters? It's kind of like email, but it's printed and it takes longer. He would always end the letter with these three words: eternity is yellow. It's not a really, really long line. It's a sphere. A church built for eternity is building on a completely different basis. The rock, Christ. Now, one final story to put to rest the lie of time here. I remember the healing of the bird. And then after that wonderful healing, there was a feeling of impending good. And that I would revisit that promise, that insight, sometime during that day. It's a wonderful way to begin a day. We should begin every day saying, this is the promise. It's coming. You know, where next? That afternoon, I heard a loud crash and a scream from our toddler. In the very same second I heard the crash and scream, silent, or both together, the thought came, this is the promise. I was filled with the conviction I'd felt that morning. The principle of this life, the life that's principle, there was no opportunity for fear. I took her in my arms. She had fallen face first and was bleeding freely from cuts both inside her mouth and outside her mouth. But I just cast that picture out. That had nothing to do with the life and the principle that had come to thought so quickly. I sang a hymn, Feed My Sheep, which we just sung a few minutes ago, quietly through the screaming. I rejoiced in that inspiration, God's allness, wholeness, onlyness, and tender immediacy. I had rejected the notion life was fragmented, or that anyone could be the child of principle and at the same time a helpless victim of an accident. After a few seconds, the screams quieted to just crying. And in perhaps a minute, she whimperingly joined me in the second verse. And soon she was singing full voice right along with me. In another minute, the end of the hymn hopped out of my lap, went back to play some more. As I cleaned her, I noticed that each gash had been replaced by a completely sealed thin red line. That's all that there was. The bleeding had stopped completely. And when I next saw her, a couple hours later, the lines themselves had vanished. The truth of the situation was so immediately evident that the injury just never went anywhere, never got anywhere. It just didn't have any time to belong to her. It vanished timelessly. And part of your homework, I'm a college professor, let's try to face every challenge with that same confidence as it comes up, as nurses do all day long. This is the promise. That's all this is. This is the promise. Oh boy. How big is our church? The church we are building, the church we occupy, the sphere of its reach and its domain. You've heard the saying, the church within is the church you're in. And Mrs. Eddy referred to the temple erected first in the hearts of its members. In miscellaneous writings, she says, more love is the great need of mankind. A pure affection, concentric, forgetting self, forgiving wrongs, and forestalling them, should swell the lyre of human love. A concentric affection, sounds like our sphere. You could say underlying, overlying, and encompassing. I wouldn't, of course, but you could. And think of a church of individual beings living this love, shining out, and all joined at the very soul, all engaged in building church, in the verbs of church, in doing church, so to speak. What does each beam do for church or bring to church? The sunlight glints from the church dome, glances into the prison cell, glides into the sick chamber, brightens the flower, beautifies the landscape, blesses the earth. Man, made in his likeness, possesses and reflects God's dominion over all the earth. Man and woman, as coexistent and eternal with God, forever reflect, in glorified quality, the infinite Father, Mother, God. And then Mrs. Eddy's admonition to her church, just as true today as it was when it was written. Hitherto I have observed that in proportion as this church has smiled on his little ones, he has blessed her. Throughout my entire connection with the Mother Church, I have seen that in the ratio of her love for others, hath his love been bestowed upon her, watering her waste places and enlarging her borders. The final word is from Isaiah. Ye shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into singing. And all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Now, with all those trees clapping away, I certainly don't need any more clapping. What I'd like to do, I'd like to ask us to take a couple minutes, just 2 or 3 minutes, and quietly think about what you've heard, what you're hearing, and then we'll just end. A couple quiet minutes. Thank you all for your stillness.
Thank you, Tom. Let's close our meeting with singing. Hymn 342. I love the title, Angel's Song. This is the day the Lord hath made. Be glad, give thanks, rejoice. Hymn 342. Thank you all for coming. Please join us for a reception in the great room.